Thomas Alive Today presents
Roy Rogers Restaurants. In 1967, the Azar's Big Boy restaurant franchise started RoBee's House of Beef restaurants in Fort Wayne, Indiana. The Marriott Corporation, which had acquired Bob's Big Boy and the Big Boy trademark in 1967, acquired RoBee's in February 1968 with plans to expand nationwide. RoBee's franchises would first be offered to Big Boy franchisees to coincide with their existing territory. At the time, there were 13 RoBee's restaurants in 6 states. During the acquisition, in January 1968, the competing roast beef chain Arby's sued the restaurant for trademark infringement and unfair competition. Because RoBee sounded too much like Arby's, the settlement required a new brand name and Marriott wanted something recognizable. Big Boy founder Bob Wyan, then sitting on Marriott's board, was friends with Roy Rogers' agent and suggested that the company approach Roy Rogers about the use of his name. Already interested in associating with a chain restaurant, Roy Rogers was in similar discussions with another company when Marriott called. Nonetheless, he accepted Marriott's offer. Roy Rogers would receive a licensing fee for use of his name and also be paid for personal appearances at the restaurants. The restaurants would be called Roy Rogers Roast Beef Sandwich Restaurants, and despite Arby's complaints, it retained its building design and covered wagon logo design. Several major Big Boy franchisees accepted Marriott's offer and became Roy Rogers regional franchisees. Midwest and Southern U.S. Pittsburgh franchisee rejected the offer and took public offense at paying fees to Roy Rogers. In the Pittsburgh area and elsewhere, other regional franchisees were sought who would also sub-franchise to smaller operators, and by January 1969 Marriott claimed regional franchises for every state but Alaska. Roy Rogers restaurants also opened in Canada. Marriott divided the United States into 33 franchise regions and required regional franchisees open a set number of restaurants in a 4-year period. Regional franchisees would pay Marriott a 2% royalty, and sub-franchisees typically pay the regional franchisee 3%, who would keep the additional 1%. A restaurant required a $35,000 cash investment upfront, including $7,500 paid to Marriott. Additionally, the cost of the building and equipment, with seating for 42 persons, cost about $100,000 in 1968, excluding the cost of land. Marriott offered financing but charged an interest rate of 12% on land and 17% for the building. The prototype restaurant seated 40 to 45 persons with additional outdoor seating on an optional patio in front of the building, but actual restaurants varied, one franchisee's dining area accommodating 75 persons. The first Roy Rogers restaurant opened up on co-founder and Hot Shops manager Henry Wright's property in April 1968 in the Bailey's Crossroads section of Falls Church, Virginia, on the corner of Leesburg Pike and Carlin Springs Road. Another opened at 5214 River Road, in Bethesda, Maryland. The area was selected because Marriott was headquartered in metropolitan Washington, D.C., the River Road unit located directly across the street. Marriott executives and family members were frequent patrons. These first locations were conversions of Junior Hot Shops, Marriott's existing fast food chain. In May 1968, RoBee's units began to open as Roy Rogers. Rogers made a 4-state tour of namesake restaurants in the southern U.S., appearing at each location for an hour, shaking hands and handing out signed photographs. Filming for the first television commercials advertising Roy Rogers restaurants took place in the Apple Valley, California area where Rogers lived with his family. In 1968 and 1969, Rogers and Friends, Earl Bascom and Mel Marion, were filmed at various locations including the historic Los Flores Ranch in Summit Valley and the Campbell Ranch in Victorville. Popular items on the menu are roast beef sandwiches and fried chicken, which was advertised by Roy Rogers under the Pappy Parker name beginning in the 1970s using a cartoon prospector. Other signature items at Roy Rogers are the Gold Rush Chicken Sandwich, a fried chicken breast with bacon, a slice of Monterey Jack cheese, and a honey-based barbecue sauce, and the Double R Bar Burger, a cheeseburger with ham. The side items featured at Roy Rogers are French fries, baked potatoes, mashed potatoes with gravy, and baked beans. In the cafeteria-style restaurants, customers push their trays on rails past stations stocked with pre-wrapped packages of hamburgers, cheeseburgers, and roast beef sandwiches. A feature of this chain in any of the locations is the Fixin's Bar introduced in 1975, which features numerous condiments. Due to this feature, sandwich items are delivered without any of the customary garnishes. After selecting and paying for these items, patrons can garnish them to their own taste at the Fixin's Bar with such items as ketchup, barbecue sauce, mayonnaise, horseradish sauce, lettuce, tomatoes, pickles, and onions. Numerous locations offer hand-dipped milkshakes made with Edie's ice cream. Rapid growth began in 1968 and Marriott made optimistic projections. In October 1968, there were reportedly 38 units open and 65 under construction, and by December, 56 open and 39 under construction. Marriott projected 700 or more Roy Rogers restaurants in 4 years. By June 1969, 105 units were open with a new projection of 870 in 4 years. A February 1970 newspaper article reported that over 160 units were in operation. However, growth halted in 1970, when Marriott suspended Roy Rogers franchising, due to financial losses from closings of failing locations. The following year, the Texas-based regional franchise, Ram Heart Systems, filed for Chapter 11 protection, asking to terminate leases found unprofitable, which were making the entire chain unprofitable. After franchising resumed, only 172 restaurants were opened by September 1972, a quarter of the 700 stores projected 4 years earlier. In 1982, Marriott bought the Geno's restaurant chain for $48.6 million. The company converted 180 of the 313 restaurants to Roy Rogers to expand in the Baltimore/Washington area. In 1990, Marriott sold the chain for $365 million to Imasco, the parent company of Hardee's, a Midwestern and Southern chain seeking further expansion into the Mid-Atlantic market. The remaining non-franchised Roy Rogers locations were converted into Hardee's restaurants, although many of the converted Hardee's continued to offer Roy Rogers fried chicken. The conversion of the Roy Rogers chain caused a customer revolt and the units returned the Roy Rogers brand. The restaurants promoted new flame-broiled hamburgers, but they were not the same as the original Roy Rogers products and later failed. Hardee's finally sold the remaining Roy Rogers locations to McDonald's, Wendy's, and Boston Market between 1994 and 1996. This left 13 Roy Rogers franchisees, with 24 freestanding locations, in addition to locations owned by his host in travel plazas along highways in the Northeast. Prior to the Hardee's acquisition, Roy Rogers cooked its fries in a blend of beef tallow and vegetable oil. Hardee's, which had already replaced tallow with all vegetable shortening, implemented the same procedure for Roy Rogers. In 1997, CKE Restaurants acquired Hardee's from Imasco, but Imasco retained the Roy Rogers trademark and franchise system. The Reza family, which owned 18 Roy Rogers restaurants, sued CKE Restaurants and Imasco for $10 million in 1997, claiming the Roy Rogers chain has been destroyed through a series of marketing errors of epic proportions. In 2002, Imasco sold Roy Rogers and its trademark rights to Plamondon Companies after 3 years of negotiation, which opened its first franchised Roy Rogers restaurant in 1980. Roy Rogers was relaunched as Roy Rogers Franchise Company, LLC. Plamondon had already opened the first new Roy Rogers restaurant in Frederick, Maryland, in 2000. At the time of the sale, there were 63 existing Roy Rogers franchises in 9 states. They also took the lead among franchisees in developing products, hosting training sessions and shooting new food photography for their stores. The company is run by Jim Plamondon and Peter Plamondon Jr., the 2 sons of Peter Plamondon Sr., head of the restaurant division at Marriott when the Roy Rogers brand was created. Based in Frederick, Maryland, Plamondon is a privately held company. In 2003, H's host formerly host Marriott Services signs agreement to continue operating Roy Rogers and travel plazas. Later the same year, Roy Rogers Franchise Company unveils its Roy Rogers Rides again. refranchising growth initiative and launches on their website. In 2021, Roy Rogers announced a strategy to build concentrically out of core markets in the Mid-Atlantic, like Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. The growth circle would slowly get bigger and include New York, the Eastern Seaboard, and states like Ohio, Tennessee, Florida, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. The next year, the company announced a new partnership with One Holland Corporation Restaurant Group and planned to open 10 new Roy Rogers locations over the next 6 years in the Cincinnati metropolitan area. The new locations would be in Hamilton, Butler, and Claremont counties in southwest Ohio, Boone, Kenton, and Campbell counties in northern Kentucky, and Dearborn County in southeast Indiana. Despite these plans, a spokesperson for One Holland Corporation says that none will be opened after the Cleves, Ohio, location failed their expectations and closed in September 2024 after opening in February of the previous year. In 2025, Roy Rogers will open a third location in Leesburg, Virginia, where it already has a strong presence, as well as one in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Roy Rogers restaurants are in these 5 states. These states are West Virginia 1, Maryland 22, New Jersey 3, Pennsylvania 7, Virginia 8. As of March 2025, all adds up to the overall number of 41 Roy Rogers restaurants.
Say howdy to fresh food at Roy Rogers.
Say howdy to our burgers, a thick and juicy size. Howdy to our roast beef, it's sliced before your eyes.
Say howdy to our chicken, and howdy to our slaw. Say howdy to our double R, it's not against the law.
At Roy Rogers, you never see frozen hamburgers, tired old chicken, or dry roast beef. We make it fresh, and that makes it delicious.
Say howdy to fresh food at Roy Rogers.
If you have any fond memories, please indicate it at the comments below. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and like.